Welcome back, everyone. So in this lesson, I'm going to cover a couple of different bass drum variations with the standard shuffle. Now, again, we're still in this vibe of the standard shuffle being a little more understated than some other shuffles. So we're not going to go too crazy, but I just want to show you some sensible variations that you could work on with your foot. Of course, with any groove, especially a shuffle, you want to keep something relatively consistent so that that groove accompanies the music and it's not too busy and people are not kind of all over the place with their instruments as well. So I'm going to just give you some sensible ideas of how to launch off from your standard groove. Now, just as a reiteration, we are talking about the shuffle rhythm on the hi-hat, and we're talking about the 2 and 4 in the snare drum, and that's going to remain pretty consistent in this variation. And again, to keep things a little more understated, I'm going to play the hi-hat with less of that molar technique, more of the straight feel rather than digging in. Again, we're going to cover that in some later lessons. And the snare drum, we're going to just play in the center of the drum rather than dealing with a overly strong rim shot. The bass drum, I'm going to use a heel up, and I'm going to lay into it a little bit more. I'm going to pull my foot back on the pedal again to have more of that uh, beater pulling off the drum rather than digging into it too much. But I will have the bass drum a little more present, as if you're looking at doing some variations, you want that to stand out a little bit more. Now, the standard shuffle itself, to remind you the way that I played before, is again the snare drum on 2 and 4 and the bass drum on 1 and 3, and I'll play that for you again right now. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, again, that's the rhythm that I had been covering up to this point in previous lessons, and I'm going to just start going into some bass drum variations right now. And I'm going to start with what we call 4 on the floor. And many of you have heard of 4 on the floor already. It's a little bit more pervasive in the jazz style or the jazz genre, but it incorporates all 4 quarter notes on the bass drum. And yes, the bass drum will strike with the snare drum, and you need to be careful not to flam it too much, or you'll hear like a separated sound. They need to lay right on top of each other. The idea of the 4 on the floor is that you're accompanying what we call a walking bass line. Do-doom, doom, 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 doom. If the bass line is a little busier or a little, even on the other end of things, a little more spaced or has some rests in it or broken pattern, you might want to go back to that 1 and 3. But if it's really doing that strict walking pattern, you're going to want to do a 4 on the floor. And again, this is going to be something that's present in some other subgenres of blues or shuffles that we're going to cover in a minute. So here's an example of the all 4 quarter notes or the 4 on the floor with the standard shuffle with the bass drum. 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, as a reminder, playing the center of the snare drum and not too many accents on the hi-hat, trying to keep that understated vibe to this as we need somewhere to go, or some other subgenres coming up that I'm going to cover. Now, with the bass drum, just like in rock music, there's so many endless variations you could do. The variations that I'm going to play you, I'm just literally going to just sort of call out some rhythms, and you will be able to download these transcriptions via file with these videos, but they're just going to be some general variations of the bass drum, just to help with different sections of the music. If you ever go to the ride cymbal, or if you go to a chorus part, or something to that effect. So now what I'll play is I'll go back to the 1 and 3 feel, more broken feel, but on 3 I'll hit the first and the third note of the triplet. So you have the 1 and the 3 and 1, 3 and that example sounds like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's try with the 1 and 3 and. First and third of both sets of those triplets on 1 and 3. 1 and 3 and. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you can hear the pattern starting to get a little more built up. I'm maybe digging in a little bit more than I normally would. It's not quite as understated. Still sticking with the straight techniques, but starting to accompany what would be a bass line, starting to work into this boom 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 da boom boom da, starting to accompany that. And I'll do a more complete bass drum now, where I'm playing the one and on one, the and of two, and the and of four, and then the three and. So one and three and one and three and. And that's the kind of more standard, busier shuffle, again, with the same techniques that I've been using. One, two, three, four. So at this point, we're really starting to work into this, bringing up the volume, bringing up the vibe edge of this shuffle. And it's starting to head toward a shuffle which we will cover in a later lesson, the rock shuffle. So we don't want to go too far because that also starts to change the technique and even the tempo a little bit at that point. Now, when you're deciding on what to play in the bass drum, you want to think musically. You want to think about, hey, where can I make these variations? It's not just about the instrumentation. It's not just about what everybody else is playing, although this is all very important because musicality and using your ear is very important as a drummer, but it's also about sections of a song, okay? If you're playing a 12-bar blues, well, maybe the first 12 bars you're playing one pattern. And maybe if something steps up a little bit in the second 12 bars, a guitar harmony, a vocal harmony, maybe you change your bass drum a little bit. And maybe when the solo starts, you move to the ride and you change it to that last pattern that I played. So you're just building each section depending upon what the music is doing and where your ear is going with this musicality. So you got to really keep your ears open, your eyes open, and those levels of communication open to figure out what everybody else is doing and how your role fits into what everything is going on. Now, again, there's so many different types of variations with the foot. There are many books you can use, like the Syncopation book by Ted Reed, to read the melody on your bass drum against the hand pattern. But you want to really think practical and you want to think repetitive in each section to make sure you're accompanying the music, and then again, sensibly, you're building up to the next section musically to make sure that you help lift the music and then bring it back down when the song comes back to the head or the melody again. In future lessons, we're going to talk about more variations and we're going to talk about some different substyles coming up as well as fills. Stay tuned.